The moment my brother replied, "We're busy, try Uber," something inside me went quiet in a way that scared me more than anger ever could. I had just buried my wife on the other side of the world, dirt still clinging beneath my nails, my chest still tight from holding myself together in front of strangers who showed more compassion than my own blood. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I typed, "No worries." And that was the last time they mistook my silence for weakness. Before I tell you what happened next, do me a small favor, subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Knowing someone is listening makes carrying this story a little lighter. My name is Evan Cross, and this is how everything I believed about family finally collapsed. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane descended toward Northlake International Airport, but my eyes burned too much to notice. I was 34 years old, exhausted beyond language, wearing the same black shirt I'd stood in at my wife's burial less than 48 hours earlier. The fabric still smelled faintly of incense and cold air. My spine ached from sleeping upright across 3 flights. My head throbbed with a dull, constant pressure that had followed me since I left her behind. For hours, one sentence looped inside my skull like a warning siren I couldn't shut off. I just buried my wife. My thumb rubbed the edge of my wedding band until the metal warmed under my skin. For a moment, the plane vanished. The hum of the engines disappeared. All I could see was the hillside outside Hansio, pine trees lining a small grave that should never have existed. The earth there had been frozen at the surface, the workers using heated tools to break it open. I remembered how my hands shook as I tossed the first handful of dirt down, how permanent the sound was when it landed. The captain's voice snapped me back into the present. I swallowed hard and turned my phone on. Notifications flooded the screen. Emails from work. Alerts from my bank. A severe weather warning advising residents to keep heat running as temperatures were expected to plunge overnight. I skimmed none of it. I opened the family group chat instead. 5 people. My mother, Marilyn. My father, Thomas. My older brother, Ryan. His wife, Claire. And me. The same group chat where birthdays were remembered selectively. Where achievements were acknowledged only if they belonged to Ryan. Where I filled silence with updates no one asked for. My fingers hovered before typing. Flight lands at 5 p.m. Can someone pick me up? That was it. No explanation. No guilt. I told myself I didn't need to justify anything. They knew where I had been. They knew what I'd just done. I watched the message send as the plane taxied toward the gate. The reply came quickly. "Ryan, we're tied up. Try Uber." 8 words. No question mark. No pause. Then my mother, "Why didn't you plan better? You know how busy everyone is." My father didn't type anything. He reacted to Ryan's message with a thumbs up emoji. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. I wanted to tell them my hands were still shaking from lowering a coffin into frozen ground. That I hadn't slept more than an hour at a time in days. That my suitcase was filled with my wife's clothes folded by strangers because I couldn't bring myself to do it. I wanted to type, "I just buried my wife." But instinct took over, the same instinct that had guided me my entire life. Don't be dramatic. Don't ask for more than you deserve. Don't make anyone uncomfortable. So I typed back, "No worries. I'll figure it out." And just like that, I stepped back into the role I'd been trained to play since childhood, the son who solved his own emergencies so no one else had to rearrange their schedule. The plane doors opened. Cold air rushed in. People surged forward, eager to reunite with families waiting on the other side of security. I watched hugs happen all around me, children sprinting into arms, couples clinging like they'd been counting seconds apart. No one waited for me. I hauled my 3 suitcases onto a cart and ordered a rideshare. The price was nearly double due to the incoming storm, but I didn't hesitate. Outside, the wind cut through my coat like metal. I glanced at my phone one last time. The group chat sat pinned at the top. No worries. I didn't know yet that those words would be repeated on the evening news. The ride into the city passed in silence. The driver hummed softly to the radio as warnings about plunging temperatures filled the airwaves. I pressed my forehead against the cold window, watching streetlights blur into pale streaks. My mind drifted backward, because grief never stays where you leave it. I met my wife, Lena, years earlier at a tech conference in Redwood City. She spilled coffee on my laptop and laughed like it was the funniest thing that had ever happened to her. She was brilliant, sharp, relentlessly alive. She noticed things other people missed, especially the way my phone lit up with family messages celebrating Ryan while ignoring my own milestones. One night, she said gently, "You know, they don't mean to hurt you. But they don't notice when you disappear." I laughed then. I don't laugh at that anymore. When Lena accepted a year-long research contract in South Korea, she hesitated more than I did. She worried about leaving me behind. I told her to go. "Love stretches," I said. "We'll be fine." My family treated it like an inconvenience. Too far. Too expensive. What about grandchildren? No one said they were proud of her. The night before she left, she hugged me tight and whispered, "If anything ever happens to me, don't let anyone tell you you're asking for too much." I didn't understand what she meant at the time. I do now. 8 hours after our last video call, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. A man spoke quickly, English tangled with panic. Lena had collapsed during a meeting. A possible aneurysm. She was being rushed to the hospital. I booked the first flight I could find. By the time I reached Hansio Medical Center, she was unconscious, machines breathing for her. The doctor explained everything gently, clinically. The damage was catastrophic. There was no pain. No awareness. When they asked me to sign the papers, my hand felt disconnected from my body. The funeral was small. A few colleagues. A translator. A cold wind. I set my phone up so my family could attend remotely. My mother complained about the lighting. Ryan left early for a meeting. My father said nothing. Afterward, I sent one message to the group chat. "She's gone." They replied with variations of "You did what you could." No one asked how I was surviving. By the time I boarded my flight home, my credit card was nearly maxed out, my body hollowed out by exhaustion. I believed I was heading somewhere safe. I was wrong. The rideshare dropped me off as dusk fell. My house stood dark and silent. Inside, the air was freezing. The thermostat was dead. The fridge was empty despite promises it wouldn't be. I slept on the couch in my coat. I woke to the sound of water. And that's when everything truly began to unravel. I woke to the sound of dripping at first. Slow. Irregular. Like a clock that couldn't keep time. For a few seconds, I lay still on the couch, disoriented, my body heavy and aching in places that didn't quite make sense yet. The house was darker than it should have been for morning. My breath fogged in front of my face. Then the dripping turned into rushing. I sat up too fast and the room tilted. Cold slammed into me instantly, sharp and unforgiving. My feet hit the floor and splashed. That was when panic finally broke through the numbness. Water was pooling across the living room, spreading like a thin sheet of ice-cold glass. I followed the sound toward the kitchen, my socks soaking through immediately, my heart pounding harder with every step. Water poured from the ceiling in 2 steady streams, cascading down the cabinets and light fixtures. The kitchen floor was already slick, the water climbing the legs of the table. I stared for a second too long, unable to process how fast everything was happening, then lunged for my phone. The weather alert from the night before came back to me in pieces. Sub-zero temperatures. Frozen pipes. Keep heat running. The heat hadn't been running. I checked the thermostat again, even though I already knew. Blank. Dead. Before leaving for Korea, I had asked my mother, specifically asked her, to turn it on the day before I returned. She'd agreed casually, like it was nothing. Just one more small favor folded into a lifetime of them. I grabbed a towel, then another, but it was pointless. The water was winning. I called the first emergency plumber I could find. Busy. Second number. Earliest appointment in 3 days. Third. Same answer. The cold snap had taken half the city down with it. The house felt like it was breathing icy air into my bones. My hands were shaking when I called my brother. "Ryan," I said the moment he picked up. "The pipes burst. The house is flooding. I can't stay here. Can I come over for a couple of nights?" There was a pause, then a sigh, like I'd asked him to do something unreasonable. "We kind of can't," he said. "The guest room's full of storage right now. And Claire and I have clients coming over tonight." "I don't need the guest room," I said. "I'll sleep on the couch. Just until I get this under control." "Yeah, I don't know," he replied. "It's not a great time. You should probably get a hotel or file an insurance claim." I stood there in ankle-deep water, staring at the wall like it might answer for him. "Okay," I said. "Thanks." I called my mother next. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Evan? The house is flooding," I said. "There's no heat. I think the pipes froze overnight. Can I stay with you and Dad for a couple of days?" She inhaled sharply, not with concern, but irritation. "Oh honey, that's terrible timing. I'm hosting bridge club tomorrow, and your father's back has been acting up. We really can't have disruption right now." "Mom," I said quietly, "it's freezing here." "Well, you're an adult," she replied. "You'll figure something out. Don't panic." My father came on the line briefly. "Stay warm," he said, and handed the phone back to her. The call ended. I stood there in the middle of my kitchen, water still pouring down around me, and something inside my chest finally gave way, not loudly, not explosively. It just collapsed inward, like a structure that had been hollow for years. If I were drowning, they would still ask me to schedule it around their plans. The lights flickered. I remembered reading something once about water and electricity and how fast things could turn deadly. I waded carefully toward the basement stairs, my phone flashlight bouncing off wet walls. Each step down felt slippery. The basement floor glistened, already covered in a shallow sheet of water. The electrical panel was mounted on the far wall. I told myself it would only take a second. Just shut off the circuit. Just reduce the risk. I took one step too fast. My foot slid out from under me. I felt my arm slam into the metal panel, and then pain exploded up my body like fire. A sharp, violent jolt shot through my chest. My vision went white, then black. I don't remember hitting the ground. When awareness came back, it was fragmented. I was on the basement floor, my cheek pressed against something cold and wet. My head throbbed violently. My arm burned. I tasted blood. I tried to stand and couldn't. Somewhere above me, an alarm was screaming, high, shrill, relentless. The carbon monoxide detector. The sound felt distant, muffled, like it was happening in another house entirely. I crawled. It took everything I had just to drag myself back up the stairs, my muscles weak and uncooperative. I collapsed onto the couch, soaked, shivering uncontrollably. The room felt smaller, darker. My breath came shallow. Every inhale hurt. I reached for my phone. My fingers wouldn't work. The alarm kept screaming. My thoughts drifted in and out, untethered. Images came without warning. Lena laughing in the kitchen. Lena asleep on my shoulder. Lena telling me not to let anyone convince me I was asking for too much. A strange calm settled over me. Maybe this wouldn't be the worst way to go, I thought vaguely. Maybe I'd see her again. The next thing I remember clearly was waking up to blinding white light and the steady beep of a monitor. My throat was dry. My head felt like it had been split open and glued back together wrong. My arm was wrapped, heavy and stiff. Warm blankets were piled over me, but I still felt cold deep inside. A nurse noticed my eyes open and moved closer. "You're in the hospital," she said gently. "You're safe." Safe. I learned what happened in pieces. My neighbor across the street had noticed water pouring out from under my front door. She heard the alarm blaring inside and knocked. When I didn't answer, she called emergency services. Firefighters broke the door down. They found me unconscious, hypothermic, with dangerously high carbon monoxide levels. Another hour or two, they said, and I likely wouldn't have woken up. While I lay there, wrapped in hospital blankets, the nurse began intake questions. "Do you live alone?" she asked. "Yes." "Any family nearby who can help?" I hesitated. "Yes," I said finally. She wrote something down. Later, I saw it in my chart. Limited family support. It was the most accurate thing anyone had written about me in years. What I didn't know yet was that while I lay unconscious in a freezing house, someone had picked up my phone. And on the screen, still open, were the last messages in my family group chat. "Flight lands at 5 p.m. Can someone pick me up? We're busy. Try Uber. Why didn't you plan better? No worries." Those 4 lines would soon leave the privacy of my phone and enter the public eye. And when they did, my family would finally understand what it looked like when silence spoke back. I didn't know my story had already escaped the walls of the hospital until a nurse hesitated before turning on the television in my room. She stood there with the remote in her hand, eyes flicking between the screen and my face like she wasn't sure which one deserved more caution. "You might want to see this," she said quietly. The screen lit up with the local evening news. The anchor's voice was calm, professional, detached in the way only people far removed from pain can be. A winter storm graphic filled half the screen, footage of frozen streets and emergency crews responding to burst pipes and power outages rolling behind her. Then my street appeared. My house. Water pouring from beneath the front door, firefighters moving quickly, a stretcher being wheeled out beneath flashing lights. My chest tightened as the reporter's voice continued. "A Colorado man returning from his wife's overseas funeral was hospitalized last night after being found unconscious in his flooded home during the historic freeze." My hands curled into the blanket. They showed a blurred photo of me from years ago, pulled from some public source. Then they showed my phone screen. Not my name. Not my face. Just the messages. "Flight lands at 5 p.m. Can someone pick me up? We're busy. Try Uber. Why didn't you plan better? No worries." The reporter paused, letting the silence do its work. Emergency responders say the man had no one with him and had been without heat for hours. I couldn't breathe. The nurse turned the volume down instinctively, but the damage was already done. My life, my grief, my near death had been distilled into a few lines of text and broadcast to thousands of strangers. And somehow, it felt less violating than how my family had treated me. Within hours, the story spread. I learned later that screenshots circulated online, shared by people who recognized themselves in that final message. No worries became a phrase attached to stories of being dismissed, ignored, left behind. While I lay there recovering, my phone began vibrating nonstop. Calls I didn't answer. Messages I didn't read. Until the hospital room door opened. My brother came in first, eyes wide, jaw tight. My mother followed, clutching a convenience store bouquet like a prop she hadn't rehearsed with. My father trailed behind them, hands shoved into his coat pockets. They didn't look scared. They looked panicked. "Oh, Evan," my mother said, rushing forward. "That report made everything sound so awful. People are misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Not what happened to me. How it made them look." My brother spoke next, too quickly. "You should have called us again. We didn't know it was that bad." I stared at them, my head pounding, my body aching, and felt something settle into place with a terrifying clarity. "You knew," I said hoarsely. "You just didn't want to deal with it." My mother bristled. "That's not fair. We assumed you'd handle it. You always do." A doctor stepped in, breaking the tension. He explained my condition calmly, clinically. Hypothermia. Carbon monoxide exposure. Concussion. Electrical injury. He said I couldn't be alone for at least 48 hours. Before he even finished, my mother jumped in. "He'll come stay with us. Family sticks together." My brother nodded eagerly. "We've rearranged our schedules. The same schedules that couldn't make time for a ride from the airport." The doctor turned to me. "What do you want?" The question landed harder than the shock. No one had asked me that in years. A nurse leaned in later and whispered, "You don't have to go with them if you don't feel safe. There are other options." The social worker outlined them gently. A hotel offering a complimentary stay. Neighbors rotating check-ins. Community support. My mother scoffed. "Strangers? That's ridiculous. This is a family matter." The social worker met her eyes calmly. "Was it?" Silence filled the room. I looked at my family, my mother smoothing her coat nervously, my brother refreshing his phone, my father staring at the floor like it might absolve him of something. And I heard my wife's voice again, clear as if she were standing beside me. "Don't let anyone tell you you're asking for too much." "I'm choosing the hotel," I said. My mother stiffened. "You're embarrassing us." "I nearly died alone," I replied. "That embarrassment isn't mine." They didn't argue. They couldn't. And for the first time in my life, I didn't back down to preserve peace that had never protected me. The hotel room was warm. That alone felt like mercy. A handwritten card waited on the desk, signed by staff members who had never met me but knew exactly what I'd lost. "I'm sorry for your loss," the receptionist had said, and meant it. Strangers meant it. I attended a grief support group at the hospital's suggestion. Folding chairs, quiet faces, stories heavy with things unsaid. When it was my turn, I told everything: Seoul, the funeral, the airport, the house, the cold. No one interrupted. No one minimized. Afterward, a man across the circle said, "I saw you on the news. Hearing it from you, it's different." That was when I realized something had shifted. My story no longer belonged to the people who ignored it. A reporter asked for a follow-up interview. I agreed, on one condition. No names. Not to protect them, but because the truth didn't need to. On camera, I spoke plainly. About grief. About how little help actually means. About how dangerous silence can be. "I'm not telling this to shame anyone," I said. "I'm telling it for the people who think they're asking for too much when they're only asking not to be left alone." The calls from my family came immediately after. Accusations. Anger. Claims that I was airing private matters. For the first time, I didn't apologize. If they saw themselves in my story, that wasn't something I could fix for them. I began rebuilding slowly. My house was repaired. The pipes insulated. A smart thermostat installed. My neighbor checked in daily, refusing to leave until she saw steam rising from my chimney again. I returned to Seoul a year later to keep a promise I'd made. Not to disappear into grief, but to carry something forward. I funded a small scholarship in my wife's name for students studying abroad. At the ceremony, I noticed my father standing at the back. He didn't speak to me then. But later, an anonymous donation doubled the fund. He wrote me weeks after that. Not excuses. Not justifications. Just truth. I didn't forgive everything. But I acknowledged effort. Some relationships settled into distance. Polite. Shallow. Boundaried. And that was okay. Because I learned something essential. Family isn't proven by words or titles or blood. It's proven by who shows up when the world goes dark and cold and unbearable. I survived the night they didn't. And that survival changed everything. After the interview aired, life didn't explode the way people expect when something goes public. It didn't become dramatic or chaotic. It became quiet. Strangely, mercifully quiet. My phone stopped buzzing. The accusations slowed, then stopped altogether. What replaced them wasn't apology or understanding, it was distance. And for the first time, that distance felt like relief instead of punishment. I spent weeks in the hotel room recovering, physically and mentally. Each morning I woke up to warmth. Real warmth. Heat that didn't flicker out. Coffee delivered without being asked. Staff who remembered my name, who asked gently how I was doing and actually waited for an answer. It shouldn't have felt extraordinary. But after years of being treated like an inconvenience, it did. Grief didn't leave. It never does. It changed shape. Instead of crashing over me in waves, it settled into quieter moments. It showed up when I passed the bakery my wife loved. When I folded laundry and found one of her scarves. When I reached for my phone out of habit to tell her something small and realized, again, that I couldn't. But grief no longer carried the weight of abandonment with it. The support group became part of my routine. I learned how many people carry losses quietly because they're afraid of being told they're too much. Too emotional. Too needy. Too inconvenient. Listening to them, I realized how deeply that belief had been planted in me long before the night I nearly died. I went back to my house once the repairs were finished. It looked the same on the outside, but it felt different inside. Safer. Like a place that belonged to me again, not a space I was constantly trying to maintain for others. I changed small things. Moved furniture. Cleared out rooms that had been frozen in time. I didn't erase her presence, but I stopped treating the house like a shrine to pain. I installed cameras. A backup generator. Redundant safety systems. Not out of fear, but out of self-respect. I stopped assuming someone else would show up if things went wrong. Because I finally understood that assumption had almost killed me. My relationship with my family didn't shatter dramatically. It thinned. Conversations became surface level. Polite messages on holidays. No more expectations. No more emotional loans I knew would never be repaid. My mother sent a message once, months later, asking if I was doing better now. I replied honestly. I'm doing differently. She didn't ask what that meant. My brother tried to resume normalcy, sending me an article about a restaurant he thought I'd like, as if nothing had happened. I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Some bridges don't need to be burned. They just don't need to be crossed again. The hardest moment came unexpectedly. One evening, I was sorting through old paperwork when I found the emergency contact form from years ago, my wife's handwriting neat and precise. My name listed first. No one else. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now, I understood. She hadn't excluded my family out of bitterness or resentment. She'd seen the truth before I had. She'd understood who would actually show up. Who would act. Who would stay. And she trusted me enough to let me learn that lesson on my own, even if it took losing her for me to finally see it. I went back to Seoul again later that year, not for closure, because closure is a myth, but for continuity. To acknowledge that my life hadn't ended there. To keep the promise I'd made at her grave that I would live. I sat by the headstone and told her everything I hadn't said before. About the night. About the hospital. About how strangers had saved me when family didn't. About how I'd finally stopped shrinking myself to fit into places where I was never fully wanted. I told her I was scared sometimes. That healing felt lonely. That strength didn't always feel brave, it often just felt necessary. And I told her thank you. For loving me in a way that never made me feel like a burden. Back home, I started rebuilding in ways that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with intention. I volunteered with an international support group for families navigating medical emergencies abroad. I spoke when asked, not for sympathy, but for clarity. To remind people that asking for help isn't weakness, and refusing to provide it has consequences whether we acknowledge them or not. I learned how to sit with silence without filling it. How to choose relationships that felt mutual instead of conditional. How to say no without explaining myself into exhaustion. Most importantly, I learned this. Being low maintenance isn't a virtue if it means being invisible. Being independent isn't strength if it's born from neglect. And family isn't defined by who shares your name, but by who shows up when you're cold, broken, and asking for the bare minimum. I didn't survive because my family saved me. I survived because I finally stopped waiting for them to. And in that moment, lying on a hospital bed, staring at a ceiling I hadn't expected to see again, I realized something that changed everything. The person who had needed me to choose them all along wasn't my parents. Wasn't my brother. It was me. And choosing myself didn't destroy my family. It revealed it. And once you see the truth clearly, you don't need to burn anything down. You simply stop standing in the fire. If this story stayed with you, do me a small favor. Subscribe to the channel so stories like this don't disappear into silence. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, because knowing I wasn't alone is what helped me survive, and your voice might help someone else do the same. Thank you for being here.